What if something you do every single week in your own kitchen, something you do specifically to save time, save money, and not waste food, is quietly creating the conditions for one of the deadliest cancers in the human body? That is not an exaggeration, and most people will go their entire lives without ever being told this. I'm Dr. Markus Dexter, and today I'm going to show you exactly which 4 foods are the most dangerous to reheat, what they chemically become the second time heat touches them, and why that transformation connects directly to pancreatic cancer, the cancer with one of the lowest survival rates in all of modern medicine. The 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer sits at approximately 12%. 12%. This is not a disease that gives you a second chance once it announces itself, and here is what makes it especially dangerous. Your pancreas never warns you while the damage is quietly accumulating. No pain, no swelling, no signal. By the time the first symptoms appear, back pain, jaundice, unexplained weight loss, the disease has typically been developing for years. Prevention is not just the best strategy. For pancreatic cancer, it is the only strategy that consistently works. And some of what drives prevention, or undermines it, is sitting in your refrigerator right now, waiting to be reheated for tomorrow's lunch. Before we go through the 4 foods, I need to give you the chemistry. Without it, this sounds like fear. With it, it's biology. And biology you can act on. Before we start, which of these 4 foods do you reheat most often? Drop it in the comments right now. I read every single one, and your answers shape every video I make after this. 10 seconds. Go. When food is cooked the first time, natural chemical reactions occur. Proteins interact with sugars and heat. Fats begin to oxidize. Nitrogen-containing compounds interact with amino acids. In most cases, the compounds produced are present in amounts the body can manage and eliminate. Reheating changes the equation fundamentally. 3 things happen simultaneously. First, whatever protective antioxidant compounds were present in the original food are further degraded or destroyed. The biological buffers that would have partially neutralized harmful compounds are gone. Second, the chemical reactions that produce small amounts of carcinogenic compounds during first cooking are accelerated again, but this time without those buffers. Third, bacterial activity during cooling and storage has already begun converting certain compounds, particularly nitrates in vegetables, into more reactive intermediate forms. Heat then drives those intermediates forward into carcinogens. The specific compounds we are most concerned about are nitrosamines and heterocyclic amines. Both have been classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as probable human carcinogens. Animal studies have provided strong evidence of their carcinogenicity on multiple organs, specifically including the pancreas. This is documented in the peer-reviewed scientific literature. Now let's apply it to 4 specific foods: hot dogs, sausages, bacon, ham, deli cuts, any meat that has been cured, smoked, or preserved using nitrates and nitrites. These foods already contain a meaningful concentration of nitrosamines simply from the way they are manufactured. The nitrites used as preservatives react with the amines naturally present in meat protein during processing, producing nitrosamines before the food ever reaches your kitchen. When you reheat these foods, you are not starting with a clean chemical slate. You are applying heat to a food that already contains documented carcinogens, and heat accelerates nitrosamine formation. The higher the temperature and the longer the exposure, the more the reaction compounds. Frying or microwaving processed meat at high heat produces a meaningfully higher concentration of nitrosamines than the original food contained. Research examining dietary nitrosamines and pancreatic cancer risk found that high dietary intake of these compounds was associated with elevated pancreatic cancer risk. Studies have proposed several mechanisms linking processed meat consumption to pancreatic cancer, with heterocyclic amines, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and nitrosamines produced by high-temperature cooking identified as key mutagens. The practical rule is simple: processed meats contain their own built-in carcinogenic precursors. Cooking them once is already a chemical event. Reheating them at high temperatures is adding accelerant to a reaction that should never have been encouraged in the first place. If you are going to eat these foods, eat them once, fresh, prepared once, and never microwaved on high. That one change alone meaningfully reduces your nitrosamine exposure. This is the one that surprises people the most. They reach for spinach precisely because it is healthy, and it is, when eaten fresh or cold. The problem begins the moment leftover cooked spinach goes back into the microwave. Here's what happens. Spinach contains naturally occurring nitrates, compounds that in fresh spinach are entirely benign and even beneficial for blood pressure and cardiovascular function. When spinach is cooked and then allowed to cool and sit, even in the refrigerator, bacterial activity and enzymatic reactions within the cooked vegetable begin converting those nitrates into nitrites. This conversion continues during storage. The longer the cooked spinach sits, the more nitrite it contains. When you reheat it, two things happen simultaneously. The heat drives further nitrite formation, and it drives a reaction between those nitrites and the amino acids present in the spinach, producing nitrosamines. A study published in the journal Foods specifically warned against storing boiled spinach for more than 12 hours at room temperature because of this direct nitrate to nitrosamine conversion pathway. The World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer confirmed that nitrosamines in food are established carcinogens linked to gastrointestinal and pancreatic cancers. The same applies to other high-nitrate vegetables: celery, beetroot, kale, and carrots. Celery in particular contains extremely high nitrate concentrations. When cooked into soups and stews and then reheated repeatedly, each cycle drives the conversion further. The irony is precise. The vegetable you are reheating specifically because it is healthy is chemically transforming into something that works against the very protection it was supposed to provide. The solution is straightforward. Cook spinach and leafy greens fresh in the quantity you will eat immediately. If you have leftover cooked spinach, eat it cold the next day, in a salad, on a sandwich, as a side. Cold does not drive the nitrosamine forming reaction. Heat does. If this is changing how you think about your kitchen, hit subscribe now. I release evidence-based health content for people over 60 every single week. The next two foods are the ones most people get completely wrong. Let's keep going. Most people understand vaguely that reusing oil is not ideal. What most people do not understand is the specific chemistry and how directly it connects to cancer risk. When a cooking oil, particularly a polyunsaturated oil like sunflower, corn, soybean, or canola, is heated to cooking temperature, a process called lipid peroxidation begins. The double bonds in polyunsaturated fatty acids react with oxygen and heat to produce a cascade of oxidized compounds, aldehydes, including acrolein and 4-hydroxynonenal, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and acrylamide in the presence of starchy foods. These compounds are genotoxic. They cause direct damage to DNA. When that oil is reheated, or when food fried in that oil is reheated, the oxidation process continues from where it left off. Each additional exposure to heat compounds the damage. The smoke point of the oil lowers with each use, meaning it reaches its toxic breakdown threshold faster and at lower temperatures every time. The concentration of aldehydes and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons increases with each heating cycle. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified several of the primary compounds produced by repeated oil heating, including acrylamide and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, as probable human carcinogens. There is an additional risk specific to reheating fried foods that most people never consider. When fried food is reheated in a microwave, the surface temperature becomes uneven. Some areas are scorched at very high temperatures while others barely warm. The scorched areas produce the highest concentrations of all three classes of harmful compounds. And that scorching often occurs at a microscopic level. You may not see visible browning, but the chemical reaction is happening. The practical rules here are clear. Do not reheat fried foods. Eat them once, fresh, immediately after cooking. If you must reheat, use an oven at a moderate temperature that warms the food evenly rather than scorching surface areas. And never reuse frying oil. Discard it after one use. The cost of a little extra oil is not worth the cumulative chemical exposure. This one is different from the others in a critical way, and that difference is what makes it so consistently misunderstood. The risk from reheated rice is not primarily a direct carcinogenic chemical reaction like the previous three foods. The risk is a heat-resistant bacterial toxin, one that reheating does not destroy, and that connects to cancer risk through a longer-term pathway that most people never hear explained. When cooked rice is left at room temperature, and research shows this happens routinely in households that cook in large batches, a bacterium called Bacillus cereus begins to multiply. Its spores survive the original boiling process and remain dormant in the cooked grain. As the rice cools and sits, those spores activate and the bacteria multiply rapidly, producing two types of toxins. One causes vomiting, The second, produced specifically during the storage phase, causes diarrhea and intestinal irritation. Here's the critical point that most people do not know. When you reheat the rice, you kill the bacteria, but the toxins they have already produced are heat stable. They survive full microwave reheating. They survive stovetop reheating. The bacteria are gone, the toxins remain in the food, and they go into your body. In the short term, those toxins cause nausea, cramping, and diarrhea. Unpleasant, but recoverable. In the long term, and this is the connection most people never hear, repeated low-level exposure to these bacterial toxins contributes to chronic intestinal inflammation. And chronic inflammation of the gastrointestinal tract is one of the most extensively documented and replicated pathways to gastrointestinal cancers. Every time the intestinal lining is irritated by heat-resistant toxins, the inflammatory response leaves microscopic damage. Over years and decades of weekly exposure, that accumulated damage creates the cellular environment in which cancer can develop. The protocol for rice is specific and simple. After cooking, cool rice quickly, within 1 hour, and refrigerate it. Rapid cooling prevents the temperature from staying in the bacterial growth range long enough for significant toxin production. Store in the refrigerator for no more than 24 hours. When reheating, reheat once only and ensure it reaches steaming hot temperature throughout, not just warm in the center. And never reheat rice a second time. Cook rice in smaller quantities so there is less leftover. If you routinely cook large batches to save time, change that habit. The time saved is not worth the cumulative risk of weekly bacterial toxin exposure across years and decades. Which of these 4 foods surprised you most? Drop it in the comments right now. The answers I hear almost always tell me exactly where the biggest gap in public health education is, and that shapes every video I make next. Let me bring this together clearly. Not anxiety, information you can act on immediately. Reheated processed meats produce nitrosamines, compounds the IARC classifies as probable human carcinogens, and that research has specifically linked to elevated pancreatic cancer risk. Reheated spinach and nitrate-rich leafy greens convert their naturally occurring nitrates into nitrites and then into nitrosamines through a heat-driven reaction that is completely preventable by eating them cold or cooking them fresh. Reheated cooking oils and fried foods produce an accumulating load of aldehydes, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and acrylamide, genotoxic compounds that damage DNA directly, with each additional heating cycle compounding the previous one. Improperly stored and reheated rice delivers heat-stable bacterial toxins that survive the microwave and accumulate as chronic intestinal inflammation over years of repeated exposure. None of this requires you to change your entire diet. It requires 4 specific habit changes. 1. If you eat processed meats, eat them once, freshly prepared, and never microwave them on high. 2. Cook spinach and leafy greens fresh in the quantity you will eat. If there are leftovers, eat them cold the next day. 3. Discard used cooking oil after 1 use and do not reheat fried foods. 4. Cool rice within 1 hour of cooking, refrigerate it, reheat once only to steaming hot throughout, and never reheat a second time. Those 4 changes, applied consistently to your weekly kitchen habits, meaningfully reduce your exposure to the specific compounds that researchers connect to the cancers with the lowest survival rates. I have sat across from too many patients who received a devastating diagnosis and asked me, why did nobody warn me about this sooner? This video is the warning. Everything shared here is based on published biochemistry, food science research, and the documented findings of international cancer research organizations. This is educational information, not a substitute for medical advice specific to your situation. If you have concerns about cancer risk or your diet, please have that conversation with your own physician. But the chemistry is real, the mechanisms are documented, and the 4 habit changes I just described are genuinely within your reach, starting tomorrow morning. If this video gave you something that will change how you cook this week, share it. Not for this channel, for the person in your life who reheats their leftover sausage every morning without a second thought. That share may be the most useful thing you do for their health today. Subscribe for more honest, evidence-based conversations about what the science actually says about the food choices that matter most after 60. I'm Dr. Markus Dexter. Protect your health with the information your kitchen never came with. I'll see you in the next one.